we already had a sound check on Dr. McIntyre. Dr. McIntyre, you're on mute.
This is a moderator, and Dr. McIntyre, you should have a microphone to the right of your name or at the bottom of your screen that you can click on.
Hi, finally.
Hello, Dr. McIntyre, Dr. Turetsky, and welcome to the meeting of the Consumer Protection Committee. We have a quorum, but we'll go ahead and have Dr. McIntyre take a roll call to be official about it. So if you wouldn't mind, Madam Secretary.
Members of the committee, Ms. Brandvine.
I'm here.
Dr. Turetsky.
I'm here.
And Dr. McIntyre, I am finally here. Yes, I believe we have a quorum.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank our prior member for the service that she gave to this committee and to the board, Ms. Ruby Garcia. So please thank Ruby on our behalf. We'll go ahead, and now that we've established a quorum and called ourselves to order, do we have any public comment for any of the items not on the agenda? And I do see that we have others who have joined, so we're not able to see the public members.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am opening up the Q&A panel. So the question and answer panel is now available. If you would like to make a public comment, please type, "I would like to make a comment" in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions for your reference. If you do not see the panel on the lower right-hand side of your screen, please click on the icon of a person next to 3 lines at the bottom middle of your screen. It is not necessary to identify yourself if you should wish to make a public comment, and we'll give you a moment to access that feature. This is the moderator, and Madam Chair, I'm not seeing any requests for public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you, Madam Moderator. We'll go ahead and move to agenda item number 3, discussion and possible action on the September 13th, 2019 Consumer Protection Committee meeting minutes. Do I have a motion from the floor before I open up for further discussion and input from the public?
I motion to accept the meeting minutes as presented.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Dr. McIntyre. We had a motion by Dr. Turetsky. Any comments from the public? Madam Moderator, if you can open it up, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will open up the Q&A panel. All right, the question and answer panel is now available. We are displaying instructions for your reference, but if you would like to make a public comment, please type, "I would like to make a comment" in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. We will give you a moment to access that feature. This is the moderator, and Madam Chair, I'm seeing no requests for public comment at this time. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any comments or questions from the board on our motion on the floor? Why don't I call for a vote, please? For those who are in favor, if Madam Secretary, you wouldn't mind taking the roll call.
Absolutely. Ms. Brandvine.
Aye.
Your vote. Dr. Turetsky.
Aye.
And Dr. McIntyre. Aye.
Thank you.
All aye.
Agenda motion carries, and we'll move to agenda item number 4. update, discussion, and possible action on adoption of Title 16, California Code of Regulations, Section 1399.273, and optician disciplinary guidelines incorporated by reference. I'll turn it over to our executive officer for any opening comments.
Thank you, Ms. Brandvine. Today's discussion comes to you after generous discussion among the Dispensing Optician Committee, additional review by the full members of the board, and today's presentation will be led by our Assistant Executive Officer, Cherie Kimball. She will be assisted by Natalia Leeper, who is our acting lead of licensing, so overseeing both optometry and opticianry. She and Mark Johnson, our policy analyst, have put a great deal of work into all of this. So I'll let Cherie begin.
Hi, committee members, can you hear me?
Hi, Cherie.
Yes, we can hear you. Hi, Cherie.
Awesome. Hi. So this is the disciplinary guidelines that they have been through the Dispensing Optician Committee. They have gone through, well, they were briefly at the board, and they've been reviewed by our legal department, and so this is kind of the final disciplinary guidelines that we would like to present for consideration, and we would just kind of like to have any feedback or commentary from the members of the committee or any changes that you guys might be interested in including.
Okay, thank you for the opening comments. I'll start with my fellow committee members before I ask a series of questions that I've earmarked. Dr. Turetsky, any questions or comments from you, please? You're on mute. Dr. Turetsky, you're on mute.
You're right, I am. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Hey, okay. So is this this is regarding comments as well on the guideline document?
Yes, so this is the full package as it would go for submission to be included in the regulations. So this is the disciplinary guidelines document, it's the memo that would go with it, and I believe there are also the forms that would be included in that.
Okay, I have just one question. On page, I believe it's page 12. Let me get over here on my computer and open that up. All right, there we go. Item number 14, sale or closure of a dispensary location.
Yes.
If the respondent doesn't inform whoever's purchasing their practice or they're closing their practice or whatever, if that person is no longer practicing as an optician, we don't have any recourse on any action, do we?
So this would be assuming that the licensee is still on probation during this time.
Right.
So if they closed or sold their dispensary location without doing the proper things to follow this specific term, it would be considered a violation of their probation, and at that point we could seek the revocation of their licenses.
But if they were, say they're on probation and they just said, to heck with it, I'm going to close this up and I'm going to retire, and they don't care about their license anymore, that's the end of it right there, isn't it?
Well, we would seek the revocation of their license and formally revoke it, and that would kind of be the end of it. Presumably, we could potentially get some cost recovery, but like I said, that would probably be the end of it once we revoke the license.
Okay. No, I was just wondering if there's any civil or criminal penalties that are involved with that other than a revocation. What if they decided they were no longer going to practice and no longer wanted a license?
Unfortunately, for the situation you're describing, I don't think that there would be any criminal penalties that we could invoke.
Okay. That's what I want to know. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting some bad feedback. Madam Moderator, are you able to determine where it's coming from?
Yes, I can go ahead and mute people's microphones. Just be sure before you start speaking to make sure that you've unmuted yourself.
Thank you. Dr. Turetsky, any other comments, or was that your only one?
That's it. That's my only comment.
Okay, thank you. Dr. McIntyre.
In reviewing this, I was really impressed by how well it was put together, how the things we had discussed were incorporated into it. My only comment is regarding the forms, and I know why it was done the way it was, but it just really I'm so grammatically correct, or I try to be, and the questions were posed as partial sentences, and I understand that it was probably in the interest of space on the forms, where questions of the licensees were directed. I don't have it in front of me, I apologize, but if you look at the forms, you can just see that the sentences, many of them are just partial sentences, like, have you ever been blah, blah, blah. If it would leave out have you, it would just say been something, question mark. And I understand why that was done. I just hope that everyone understands the question, even though they're not complete sentences. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. On the
Dr.
form,
McIntyre.
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find it, but I'm trying to do it on a cell phone here. So it's a
No,
little
certainly.
bit difficult.
So on page 1 of 10, we begin the questions with been arrested, charged, or convicted of any violation of federal, state, or local laws. So I think that there may be some places where there are antecedents to the questions, but it appears here there is not. So we can certainly go through. I think that it's always helpful for folks who are filling out government forms to be clear about who the actor is. So we can certainly go through and take a look at that if you'll just allow staff the leeway to make grammatical changes as necessary.
And that's all I had. And I understood the questions, but because again, it's not grammatically correct. And with many people, you have to be so specific. You can't leave out even basic words because they'll claim that it wasn't a complete question and they didn't understand the meaning of the question. So just saying. That was all I had. Everything else looked great.
Okay, thank you, Dr. McIntyre. I have a few comments starting on page 9 under probation monitoring costs. Item number 4. In sentence number 1, we speak to monthly costs, but it would be good to attribute who those monthly costs would be paid by. So to attribute it to the respondent, are we attributing it to the states paying that? I think we have an opportunity here to clarify the monthly cost. The sentence before just says all costs incurred for probation monitoring during the entire probation shall be paid by the respondents. The monthly cost. So now we're stipulating monthly costs versus all costs must be adjusted as expenses increase or decrease. And yet then we talk about monthly payments, or are we talking about some installments? Because then on page 10, we're shifting over to payment plans when we have no mention of monthly costs. So we're kind of shifting. If you could take a look at that for consistency, it may be helpful. It infers that there might be installments, but yet we've got monthly costs. And I think in 9 and 10, we need some clarity on how payments, if they're monthly or they're a payment plan or they're installments, fixed installments paid monthly, how these fees are coming about. And then on page 13, under optional probation conditions, go there next, we list a number of items. There's approximately 33, yes, there's 33 items. And then on page 17, we have a similar list growing, and at the end of it, they're called optional. So are those lists firm, or both of them considered optional when it comes to what we can do during probation or other times? If you could take a look at that, please, and clarify.
This is Will McGuire, Board Counsel, and if I'm not mistaken, Mark can correct me if I'm wrong, but just to answer that question, the terms themselves that you referenced that start on page 13, numbers 15 through 33, those terms themselves are optional, and then it looks like within the certain terms, which start on page 17, like you said, that particular paragraph or sentence that follows after the words optional, that's like, let's say you take the option to employ term number 25, medical health evaluation, then you still have the option to add that term at the end as well. Is that right, Mark? That's what I understood. Or Sheree?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, I believe you're correct, Will.
Okay, so we discussed fitting and adjusting lenses. And is it on the list of 33 within the 33 options? If you can confirm that all of your titled paragraphs that are within quote optional, if these are examples but not inclusive, and yet your explanations below are inclusive or exact. There is a discussion of fitting and adjusting lenses, and I just was wondering where it is on the list of 33 options on page 17. So it says, again, optional, respondent shall not engage in fitting and adjusting lenses or dispensing until notified by the board. And if that is, quote, optional, under the line item medical health evaluation on 13, we put the word optional in front of the fitting and adjusting lenses, but we don't put the word optional in front of any of the other line item discussions. So it infers that only some things are optional and other things are not. So I'm not certain if you want to take, it's just confusing. How can you have optional of optional, or you have another option within an optional? Because then it infers everything else is not optional.
I am taking a look at this, Madam Chair. Give me just one moment.
No problem.
I see what you're responding to within on page. So I see it within page 17, the medical health evaluation. But I'm wondering, more importantly, if perhaps that's redundant, because we, of course, can always enact probation term 21, which is suspension. So I'm just.
There's two and by the way, the same optional is repeated twice, and yet this whole section is optional.
Can we just state that it's an additional option instead of having optional under an optional?
That's
say
what I'm
additional
trying to
options.
ascertain, and that's what's confusing. So I just don't know from a legal standpoint, when we have to defend this, when it comes before us in closed session, and I don't want us to get caught in a technicality, that it's an option of an option, or are all of them options, and this is just one of those things for consideration under the option 24 and under the option 25. And because if not, the word optional might need to appear in front of any and all of these, the starts of these paragraphs.
So I think within our intention, I think we can certainly look at wording this differently. I think that we want the discretion to determine that the mental health or medical health evaluation is of such a nature that there shouldn't be practice during the time that that is occurring and being evaluated. I think maybe we can take a look at whether or not there's a different nomenclature that can be used for those additional terms. But I also, Cherie, just continuing to think about this, whether or not it makes sense that that really is just a matter of term of suspension, and we can suspend an applicant from fitting and adjusting until that medical evaluation or mental health evaluation has been received and analyzed by the board.
So typically when we use the suspension probation term, it's for a specific number of days. So what this suspension ties to specifically is, have we received a medical evaluation that shows this probationer is safe to practice? And that's what the suspension is dependent on. So I don't know if using a suspension as a separate term would be able to link them together like that.
And if not, perhaps just get rid of the words optional in front of 17, both where it shows up twice between item 24 and item 25.
I think both the medical and the mental evaluation. I think you're right, Sid. I think that's what it comes down to. I mean, as I was trying to sort of think it through, in what case would it really be that we would allow a licensee to continue to practice while they're undergoing a mental or a medical evaluation that will clearly impact the way in which they practice. So I think, Cherie, do you want to weigh in on if we just were to remove optional from both of those terms and then, or from those sentences, and that, of course, if you are given term 25, then you shall not engage in fitting and adjusting or dispensing until notified by the board that its determination that the respondent is medically fit or mentally fit to practice safely. I think that's where I'm kind of coming down on this. Cherie, can you speak to that?
So yeah, if you remove the fact that it's optional, then it does become mandatory. So exactly like you said, if somebody is ordered to have a mental health evaluation or a medical health evaluation, they will not be able to practice until that evaluation has been completed and approved by the probation monitor, whereas having that portion of it be optional means that if the person is, that means that we have the discretion to decide whether they should be suspended or not.
Then maybe it's more of either for additional consideration or make it a sentence. The board has the ability to consider whether the respondent shall not engage in fitting and make it more of an action. So either the board needs to, for additional consideration, perhaps in parentheses, or just make it a statement that the board has the option to X, Y, or Z instead of just putting it in optional, because optional within optional is confusing. And it can infer, a lawyer can stand up and say, we're in an optional section. So you can get rid of everything above the option, the word optional, and what only stands is this little piece. If the board decides you won't be able to do anything above, but you can say that the respondent shall not engage in fitting. It looks like it's option number 2 under the same heading. There's a disconnect here. Is our attorney on?
Yes.
So actually, I was going to ask,
Hello?
Madam Moderator, would you be so kind as to elevate to panelist Danny Rogers, who's our a legal counsel specific to regulations?
Thank you, of course. So Danny, I have promoted you to a panelist. Can you do a quick mic check for us?
Morning, or good afternoon, actually.
We can hear you. Great, thank you.
There we go.
While Danny's getting logged on, this is Will. I'm here as well, and I was just looking at some other boards, DGs, disciplinary guidelines, and just as a guide, and some of them have similar language. It does say in one that I'm looking at, it has a bracket underneath the main term, and then it says optional language. I don't know if that's more helpful than what we have is just optional. I'm not saying that theirs is necessarily the end all be all, but just looking at that, some other boards have used that. So I'll let Danny speak if she has specific thoughts. I'm fine with any of the changes we're discussing. I just want to let the staff have maximum, flexibility.
Right, exactly. And I'm a little nervous that when we call something optional under an option, it could be perceived that one replaces the other instead of, I believe what we're trying to do here is say that if we impose the mental health evaluation, we are going to follow paragraphs 1 through 5 and 6, but we also may do or take another action. One does not preempt all of those other 6 or 7 paragraphs.
Yeah, I mean, this is Will, and I don't read it that way. I guess someone could, and some lawyer could make that argument, as you say, but I don't think it's the practice within DCA legal for, where the folks who are mostly interpreting this stuff to view it that way. But, if you see it differently, we're definitely open to having it be more clear. So, Danny, do you have any particular thoughts on this?
No, I would concur with you, Will. I think that it's fine if there's a concern with clarity, we can work on that. There's more than one ways to skin a cat here, I think.
Okay. And that is the end of my comments.
I would like to jump in with a comment that I didn't even notice that this was there until you just brought this up, but can I make a comment?
Absolutely, Dr. Koretsky.
All right, so, and Deborah, I would appreciate your thoughts on this as well. Respondents shall not engage, the optional part, respondents shall not engage in fitting and adjusting lenses or dispensing, et cetera, et cetera. Should that be a little more specific maybe in terms of prescription eyewear and devices instead of just saying lenses? I could see somebody saying, I wasn't fitting the lenses, I was adjusting the frame.
That's what I thought, because we don't adjust lenses, we adjust frames. Eyewear would be appropriate.
And I think it should be more like prescription eyewear. If somebody comes in and just wants their sunglasses tightened up and they're a pair of non-prescription glasses, I don't see what the difference is with that. So maybe prescription eyewear and devices, or maybe eyewear and devices.
I wouldn't even specify prescription because, so what if you're adjusting someone's non-prescription sunglasses and you poke them in the eye, putting it back on their face, or adjusting behind their ears? So I would just say eyewear in general.
Yeah, I'd say eyewear, and I'd also throw in devices, so that way it covers anything else that might later be. Yeah, I mean, we could be talking about something like Google glasses or something like that.
So we can say optical eyewear.
Okay.
Or optical devices, eyewear and optical devices.
There you go, eyewear and optical devices.
May I jump in? If I can hear from Danny possibly and Will, is there a precedent to add, because we do give a definition to fitting and adjusting within statute. Our new statute changes, we have that definition. Is there any precedent to adding as defined by, or adding that definition in so that they are, of course, then also mirrored?
Certainly, the only downside to doing that would be to have to change the regulatory language every time the statute changes, which that doesn't seem to be a big deal because it changes that often.
I know I've got Natalia and Alex on the phone, as well as Mark. If one of you would be so kind, do you recall, or do you have your hands on the definition of fitting and adjusting that we have set upon through the multiple discussions within the Dispensing Optician Committee?
I'll stand by. I'll dig it out.
And while we are waiting for that, are we able to open up for public comment at this time, or Madam Executive Officer, should we wait?
I think really, if legal, I think that's an excellent use of time. If legal counsel doesn't have an issue with it, I think that's an excellent way for us to make use of time and give staff an opportunity to tell us where we've set on that.
Legal counsel, are you okay with that?
Yeah, that's okay.
Thank you. I'd like to open up for public comment. Madam Moderator, if you'd be so kind.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have opened up the Q&A panel, so if members of the public would like to make a public comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions.
Madam Moderator, that we have any comments or questions?
That is correct. I'm seeing no requests for public comment at this time. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Thank you. I will do so.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I might, I'm also realizing as we're taking a look at this list of optional conditions, we have on number 17, number 28, and number 29, the specification that these are for RDOs only. I think, though, that we want to update our language so that it's consistent with where we are. Our intention is to make our statutes clearer. I think we should follow that same intent in the probation or in the regulations and in these disciplinary guidelines, so that we're calling these specifically ophthalmological device businesses, I believe is what we've set upon, because RDOs has been such a confusing term in our taking over this license type or these license types. The current statute uses registered dispensing optician to speak about a business, but then also again about individual licensees. So I think that we'll just, for clarification, we'll use that business specific term on probation optional items 17, 18, and 29.
Thank you. And if you could just do a general comb of the document in case there's any others that are there that we're not readily seeing. Thank you.
Of course.
And is staff ready for us?
Yeah. Hi, Sid. It's Mark. So in our proposed optician statutes, we have it's proposed to have fit and fittings separately adjusted. Fit and fittings is in one section, and then adjusting. So I'll read out fit and fitting just real quick. fit and fitting means doing any or all of the following acts prior to the act of adjusting, designing, the taking of measurements to determine the size and shape or specifications, or replacing the prescribed optical aids, pursuant and incidental to the filling of any prescription for lenses, spectacles, eyeglasses, contact lenses, flannel contact lenses, and other ophthalmic devices as specified in Section 2541, and prescriptions. So, lenses, spectacles, eyeglasses, contact lenses, ophthalmic devices is under fitting, and then adjusting means doing any or the following acts, either singly in combination with others, adopting, delivering, or replacing the prescribed optical aids pursuant and incidental to the filling of any prescription for lenses, spectacles, eyeglasses, contact lenses, flannel contact lenses, and other ophthalmic devices as specified in 2541, and prescriptions. So
I just want to note, though, for folks, a reminder that the definitions and sections as read by Mark here are, in fact, our proposed changes. So that is not what is in current law. So I know that it could be cumbersome, but perhaps it's just, we should just put these definitions into the dispensing optician disciplinary guidelines so as to be clear, because there isn't a reference to make, because these are suggested changes that we'll need to put into legislation and have passed by the legislature and the governor, signed by the governor.
Good call. Okay.
Okay, so if I'm understanding it correctly, we want to just add in those two specific proposed definitions into these disciplinary guidelines.
So I think Cherie, I think as the founding, kind of creator on this, I think it will be important for her to go through and look at where we can add those definitions, if it is directly within those places that we've identified, or if there is a more clear place to add those earlier in the document. And I think that in Cherie and Danny in concert can find the best way for us to attach that, or to attack that.
Agreed.
With the changes that we've discussed today, do we feel comfortable making a motion on this particular document, or does the committee wish to see it again? Dr. Turetsky?
I'm happy to make a motion.
Dr. McIntyre, do you feel comfortable, or would you like to see it again?
My only concern is the option under the option. Is that what we're talking about? A motion to approve the whole document?
We're talking about the whole document.
Because
so you're
we didn't really come to a conclusion on exact wording that we're going to use for option under option, correct? So
correct.
I don't feel comfortable moving yet until I know what that final wording is going to be.
Okay.
Danny, do you by chance want to weigh in here? I think that, as I was listening to the discussion, I think that Sid came down to a good wording of simply the board may additionally opt to, restrict the licensee or the registrant from fitting and adjusting until such time that, the remainder of the text. Danny, do you feel like that would be appropriate and in fitting with what's typically done, or is there another edit that you would want to make?
No, not at this point. I think that sounds fine. I defer to you on that.
Okay, so I think then what we're looking at then, Dr. McIntyre, is that we remove optional, and instead it would say the board may take the additional action of prohibiting the respondent from engaging in fitting and adjusting lenses or dispensing until notified by the board of its determination that respondent is mentally fit to practice safely, and then a mirror of that language in the medical health.
With that change, I would be fine with the document with everything we've discussed today.
Excellent. Just to make sure, Cherie, do you have an issue with implementing that edit for those changes?
I don't see any problems with that.
And then the only area for staff to look at then is the monitoring costs, and to make sure that there's clarity about the kind of payment, so that if it's installments are not necessarily monthly payments. Installments could be quarterly, they could be weekly, they could be anything. So if we could bring some consistency to what we're saying specifically around payment plans, monthly costs, probation fees, et cetera, I think we need some consistency there, if you could check for that. So those are just the two, it sounds like, outstanding areas of edit.
And I think that can be easily accomplished as well, Cherie, if you want to weigh in. I think we can just go through and make sure that we're consistently maybe explaining the installment, because installment plan, you're right, Chair Brandbein, could mean, quarterly or something of that nature. So just to spell out in those cases, or yearly. Cherie, if you.
Yeah. So I will go through and look at the cost recovery and the deprobation monitoring cost language and make sure it's really clear what we're asking for and that it's consistent.
Great, thank you.
And it was also mentioned that maybe the language on the application might be expanded upon just for grammatical consistency.
Please. So we have those three, I would call them areas of edits to make on the document.
And so a potential motion could just be to recommend that the board take up the disciplinary guidelines with the amendment, directing staff to make the amendments that were discussed here today.
And if I have a motion, and if not, we will leave it until the next meeting.
I'm more comfortable waiting until I see what those changes are.
Okay, thank you.
I'd rather take it up at the meeting.
That's fine. Dr. Turetsky, you were speaking, but you were on mute.
I was on mute. Do we want to make the changes and pass it along to the full board, or do we just want to hold off until we can see the changes in this committee and pass it on to the full board?
Would it make I don't know if it would make the next packet or not. Madam Executive Officer, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so if we were to not pass it through to the board today, then we would not be able to put it on the August 13th agenda. I really do think that there have been some clear preferences communicated today by our committee members, and I think that we can certainly trust that staff and legal counsel will make those changes in a way that will be acceptable, so that we are able to agendize it for the next full board meeting. And of course, if that is, not the case, then I think that it's certainly important for committee members to express that, this is not the way we had intended the discussions, the edits to be made. But I really do, in order to get ourselves to a point where we're starting at even the regulatory timeline for this, right? So we're still looking at another year and a half from board approval. So I would love for us to get this on the August board meeting agenda as opposed to the October board meeting agenda, but of course defer to what is comfortable among the committee members.
Are we able to have a committee member review the document with the staff, not the whole committee, but if I appointed one person to serve in the capacity to review that the edits were made prior to going into the board packet, is that acceptable by legal counsel?
Yeah.
Okay, because it's not a quorum of the quorum.
Perfect. So if
Dr.
make
McIntyre or Dr. Turetsky, either one of you have an interest in serving in that oversight capacity?
I'll do that. I don't have a problem.
No, that's fine. I'm comfortable as it is, and with Deborah's second set of eyes on it, I think we've got it nailed.
Dr. McIntyre, if you would be so kind, please.
I will.
Thank you. So please note that the chair is appointing Dr. McIntyre to serve in an oversight capacity for the edits mentioned relative to the Update, discussion, and possible action on adoption of Title 16, California Code of Regulations, Section 1399.273, and the optician disciplinary guidelines incorporated by reference.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We'll ensure that that oversight occurs.
Thank you. Agenda item number 5.
No, just to pause, so maybe start jumping in, but do we want to have a vote to actually
To pass it to the board, exactly, yes.
to the board with
Yeah.
the caveat that Dr. McIntyre is going to be working with staff as well to finalize it?
I would motion to adopt the amendments that have been discussed and provide a review by Dr. McIntyre, and upon her review and approval, pass the document to the full board for their discussion and potential approval.
And I'll second, since it involves Dr. McIntyre taking action.
And let's have an additional period for public comments if it's changed significantly.
All right, this is the moderator, and I will go ahead and open up the Q&A panel. All right, the question and answer panel is now available. You should see it in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. If you would like to make a public comment, please type, "I would like to make a comment," and submit it to all panelists. If you are not seeing the Q&A panel, please click on the icon of a person next to 3 lines at the bottom of your screen, and we are displaying instructions for your reference. Madam Chair, I am seeing no requests for public comment at this time. Would you like me to go ahead and close the Q&A panel?
Please do, and then I'll open up for a vote, please. Madam Secretary, if you don't mind, roll call for the motion on the floor. You are on mute.
Ms. Brandwein, your vote. Dr. Turetsky
Aye.
and Dr. McIntyre, aye.
The motion carries. Thank you. Agenda item number 5, review, discussion, and possible action on optometry strategic plan. The presentation by Solid and our executive officer, please.
Madam Chair, actually, if I could I wanted to correct what I said earlier. I wanted to make sure that I really recognize the staff who have worked so hard on those disciplinary guidelines. So I mentioned Cherie, but I want to also make it clear that our analyst for the opticianry program, Alex Juarez, has been in the second lead on that and really getting those done. So thank you for the opportunity to recognize staff appropriately.
Thank you, Alex.
Staff as well.
And I will allow our moderator, who is also, at least for now, hopefully continuing, our facilitator for our strategic planning process, the co-moderator, Ms. Tricia St. Clair.
Thank you very much. So if I could have the next slide, please. And then, so I like to, when I do a quick overview of strategic planning, I like to explain why we do it. And when the Department of Finance audits a board, they look to see, does the board have a strategic plan? Because of this, the Department of Consumer Affairs requires the boards to have a strategic plan. So Solid Planning is invited by the board as a neutral party to handle the strategic planning. We do it through team building, we organize efforts, and we help the board accomplish success. Next slide, please. So when we do strategic planning, we always begin with, where's the board now? So the mission is why the board exists. We look at the values, which is how they accomplish their purpose, and then the environmental analysis. So the environmental analysis is literally looking at the environment inside the board as well as the environment outside and identifying strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And then we have the board members and staff consider this feedback when crafting new objectives for the new strategic plan. The vision is a snapshot of where the board hopes to be in the future. So when crafting strategic objectives, we want the board to consider, will this objectives help us reach that vision? So the board has its goals already decided upon, and then the objectives are crafted during the strategic planning session itself. Next slide, please. So here's a flow chart of the entire strategic planning process. The arrow indicates where we are now. So already the stakeholders received a survey that ended at the end of June. I checked, and the last time you did a survey back in 2016, you had 428 responses. This time you had 563. So you had an increase in responses, which we always like to see. I have 2 more interviews to do with board members before we've completed those. Committee members have been interviewed. Management has been interviewed, and then the staff took their own individual survey. So what is happening now is all these anonymous responses are being compiled into what we call the environmental scan. Board members and participating staff will have a copy of the environmental scan 1 to 2 weeks before your strategic planning process on August 13th, with the idea that you will review the document and use it to help craft objectives for the new strategic plan. But actually, you can start crafting objectives now. You've been sent the old strategic plan as well as what we call the objectives worksheet. And at the back of that worksheet, we have action verbs. We always like the objectives to begin with an action verb so that they're actually actionable. And so you can start looking at the old plan and see where you'd like the new plan to be headed. Next slide, please. So I already mentioned strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Strengths and weaknesses are inside your board. An example of a strength could be you have a small staff, but you accomplish a lot. A weakness, I'll use Board of Accountancy as an example. One of their weaknesses, or actually, I'll just stick with Board of Optometry. Another weakness might be you do have a small staff, and so that could be a weakness you have to deal with. An opportunity could be telemedicine with the whole pandemic, and then other people might see telemedicine or telehealth as a threat. So 2 ways of looking at that, but that's an example of something happening in the outside world, outside Board of Optometry that could be addressed in your new strategic plan. Next slide, please. So back in March, one of my colleagues had board staff take a survey to see what had been done with the previous strategic plan. And she came up with this report card showing how many objectives had been achieved, how many were mostly achieved, and then the red category pretty much not started at all. And I would like to point out that in the red category, 8 of those objectives have words such as research. And when the action item is something like research, there really isn't a way to measure that. So if you spend 1 hour doing research, basically you could call that objective done. So when you craft your new objectives for your new strategic plan, I would encourage you to use stronger verbs. And again, we have a list of those at the back page of the objective worksheet. So like I said, that's something you can actually get started with now, referencing your old plan, and then you will be getting the environmental scan 1 to 2 weeks ahead of your strategic planning process. Any questions for me?
Any questions, board members, committee members? Does not appear to be questions at this time.
No questions from me.
Okay, thank you. Did you need to?
Our executive officer, any comments on this particular agenda item?
So I think at this point, what we'll do is have Mark review the 2017-2021 objectives in order to see what we focused on in this last period, and then, of course, to also look at what we've been successful in, and then what it is we maybe want to continue into the next strategic plan in order to give more work product to those. And I think that that includes some of those items, as Ms. Sinclair mentioned, those that are our research, and perhaps thinking about whether or not there are ways to more actionably advance that objective for this committee.
Okay, thank you. And if I understand correctly, you will be bringing those recommendations or that review to our next committee meeting. Do we as a committee need to start thinking about some potential objectives ourselves, or
Yes.
should we wait for the survey to come out and or in tandem? What is
I think in
the
tandem.
timeline?
I think in tandem. I think that you know, of course, that all of you as board members have been a part of this full strategic plan, not just a part of the consumer protection issues within the strategic plan. And so I think that it's great. You know, I think we've all started to think about this as we've gone through our individual interviews. And I'm sure there are things that committee members have thought of, and I'd love to hear those before they're adulterated by any survey results. But I think that of course, I think in tandem is exactly what we should do.
Okay, thank you. And will you be soliciting input or?
Yes. So I think what we'll do now is we'll have Mark go through those previous objectives that will hopefully start to spur some discussion. I'd really appreciate here among the three of you an opportunity to hear your thoughts on what we've done and what else you see on the horizon. I think then we at least start to get the juices flowing, and if there are recommendations that committee members want to submit between now and August, the August strategic planning meeting, I think that that's an excellent opportunity for us to look at some action verbs and think about how we can make those clear objectives for the board meeting.
So our
Mark?
key takeaways to bring those to the board meeting for the open discussion with the board. Not only our broader comments for the strategic plan as general members, but then committee members to give thought to some specific goals and objectives that we may like to tackle within this committee in the year plus ahead. Okay. Dr. Turetsky or Dr. McIntyre, any comments on this subject? I'm going to open it up to the public. Okay, thank you. Madam Moderator, if you can open to the public, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will go ahead and open the Q&A panel. All right, the question and answer panel is now available. If you would like to make a comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" in the field provided and submit it to all panelists. If you do not see the Q&A panel, please click on the icon of a person next to three lines at the bottom of your screen.
We are still on for a 2-day meeting in August, correct?
That is correct. And the intention is, oh, I apologize.
Sorry, this is the moderator, and I'm seeing no requests for comment at this time. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Please close the Q&A panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I was just saying that our intention is that the first day, that Thursday, would be to focus on the strategic plan and offer an opportunity for additional discussion,
okay,
as well as input from the from stakeholders.
Virtual meeting. All right, agenda item number 6, future agenda items. Committee members, do you have any future agenda items? Okay, let's open this item to the public, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will go ahead and open the Q&A panel. All right, the question and answer panel is now available. If you would like to make a comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" in the lower field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. If you are not seeing that field, click on the icon of a person next to 3 lines at the bottom of your screen, and we are displaying instructions. I'll give you a moment to access that. This is the moderator, and Madam Chair, I am seeing no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Please close the Q&A panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll go ahead and move to agenda item number 7, which is the adjournment. I'd like to thank staff for the preparation that went into today's meeting and to getting our guidelines to where they need to be for review by our committee, and then ultimately sending it over to the board, and thank the committee members for their time. I also like to thank the moderator for doing a great job helping us through this virtual meeting process.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And
you're welcome.
Yes, thank you.
Bye, Sid. Bye, Deborah. Bye, Shara. Bye, Sheree. Bye, Mark. Bye, Alex.
Bye, team. Bye, Deborah. Bye, David.
Bye.
See ya.
Thank you.